Hello? Perfect. Okay. Welcome everyone to the March 28th, 2024 regular meeting of the San Francisco Elections Commission. I'm the President, Robin Stone. The time is now 6:01 p.m. and I call the meeting to order. Before we proceed further, I would like to ask Commission Secretary Marisa Davis to briefly explain some procedures for participating in today's meeting.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you, President Stone. The minutes of this meeting will reflect that this meeting is being held in person at City Hall, room 408, 1 Dr. Carlton B. Goodlett Place, San Francisco, 94102, and remotely via WebEx. As authorized by the Election Commission's February 15, 2023 vote, members of the public may attend the meeting to observe and provide public comment either at the physical meeting location or remotely.
Oh, Marisa, I don't think you are heard. You can be heard. Is your microphone on?
I can hear her.
Oh, you can hear?
Yep.
Okay. Let me ask. Let's proceed.
Okay. Public comment will be available on each item on this agenda. Each member of the public will be allowed 3 minutes to speak, 6 minutes if you are on the line with an interpreter. When providing public comment, you are encouraged to state your name clearly. Once your 3 minutes have expired, staff will thank you and you will be muted. Please direct your comments to the entire commission and not to a specific commissioner. When joining by phone, you will hear a beep when you are connected to the meeting. You will be automatically muted and in listening mode only. To make public comment, dial *3 to raise your hand when your item of interest comes up. You will be added to the public comment line. You will hear, "You have raised your hand to ask a question. Please wait until the host calls on you." The line will be silent as you wait your turn to speak. If at any time you change your mind and wish to withdraw yourself from the public comment line, press *3 again. You will hear the system say you have lowered your hand. When joining by WebEx or a web browser, make sure the participant side panel is showing. At the bottom of the list of attendees is a small button or icon that looks like a hand. Press the hand icon to raise your hand. You will be unmuted when it is time for you to comment. When you are done with your comment, please click the hand icon again to lower your hand. In addition to participating in real time, interested persons are encouraged to participate in this meeting by submitting public comment in writing by 12 noon on the day of the meeting to elections.commission@sfgov.org. It will be shared with the commission after this meeting has concluded and will be included as part of the official meeting file. Thank you, President Stone.
Thank you. Secretary Davis, will you please proceed with item 1, commission roll call?
President Stone.
Present.
Vice President Parker.
Here.
Commissioner Bernholz.
Here.
Commissioner Dye.
Here.
Commissioner Lavolsi.
Here.
Commissioner Wong.
Present.
With 6 members present and accounted for, you have a quorum.
Wonderful. Thank you. I will state the land acknowledgement resolution adopted, or the land acknowledgement is adopted in the 10/19/22 Elections Commission resolution. The San Francisco Elections Commission acknowledges that we ancestral homeland of the Ramaytush Ohlone, who are the original inhabitants of the San Francisco Peninsula. As the indigenous stewards of this land, in accordance with their traditions, the Ramaytush Ohlone have never ceded, lost, nor forgotten their responsibilities as caretakers of this place, as well as for all peoples who reside in their traditional territory. As guests, we recognize that we benefit from living and working on their traditional homeland. We wish to pay our respects by acknowledging the ancestors and relatives of the Ramaytush community and affirming their sovereign rights as First Peoples. Let's now move to agenda item number 2, general public comment. Public comment on any issue within the Elections Commission's general jurisdiction that is not covered by another item on this agenda. Hi. You will have 3 minutes to speak. And Secretary Davis, when you're ready, will you just let the public commenter know? No problem. Just bear with us for one moment. Sure, microphone is on. Try now.
How's that?
That's
Oh, I
better.
can't
You
myself
can
over here.
also lift it up to be closer.
Thank you.
We'll make sure you get your full, I'll keep an eye and give you extra time.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Hi, my name is Jen Nosikoff. Before I get into my comment, I just wanted to say thank you for all the work that you do for the elections. I'm a candidate for District 1 Supervisor, and I've had a really good experience with the Department of Elections in general, outside of the comment that I'm about to make here, and I wanted to say that first and foremost. My name is Jen Nosikoff, and I'm a current candidate for Supervisor in District 1. I'm here tonight to discuss a concern regarding the recent change to the policy on the candidates' use of Chinese names. Last July, when I filed to run for supervisor, I was given the Chinese name Gao Suzhen by a member of our Chinese community. This name has significantly helped me connect with the Chinese-speaking voters and has been a key part of my campaign since the beginning. I was following a well-established practice for non-Chinese candidates in San Francisco, despite there being no guidance from the Department of Elections on this matter. However, the rule change mid-campaign to require candidates to have used their Chinese names for at least 2 years has put this practice in jeopardy, and it directly affects my ability to communicate effectively with voters who know me by this name. On top of that, replacing window signs and other campaign materials at this stage would not only be cost prohibitive, but time consuming, resources I, as a first-time candidate, am stretched thin on. I'm asking for my Chinese name to be grandfathered in, given that I adopted it based on the rules and practices in place before the recent changes. This request isn't just about my campaign. I believe it's about fairness for all candidates in the election process and respecting the connections I've already made within our community. Allowing the continued use of my Chinese name on the ballot aligns with our city's values of diversity and inclusion and recognizes the practical challenges of such unexpected rule changes. It's crucial for ensuring that our electoral process remains free and fair and accessible to all candidates and voters alike. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Secretary Davis, are there any public commenters on the line? Wonderful. Let's close out agenda item number 2 and move to agenda item number 3, approval of previous meeting minutes. Discussion and possible action on previous elections commission meeting minutes, namely the February regular commission meeting. It will open up for commission discussion. I think the timer is on. It's okay. It's going to go off in a second, just so you know. Commissioner Dye.
Yeah, I didn't have really any substantive comments except on item number 4 under director's report. I think for the benefit of the public, it'd be helpful to provide a description of resolution 526-23 rather than forcing someone to have to go look that up. So maybe adding a couple of words like regarding the use of Chinese character-based names or something like that.
That's it?
That's it.
Wow. Would you recommend that, so you want the context of that?
Yeah.
We could also potentially hyperlink to the
Yeah,
to the
great idea.
resolution.
Anything to make it easier to understand.
Cool. Thank you, Commissioner Dye. Anyone else? Okay, let's move to public comment on agenda item number 3, the approval of the previous meeting minutes from February 14th. Thank you, Thank you, Secretary Davis. Let's move to agenda item number 4, the director's report. Discussion and possible action regarding the director's report. And I will hand it over to Director Arntz.
Thank you, President Stone. So this report's not specific to the election. There is election information. So I'll wait till next month's meeting before I go into all that. There is information here about the city moving to a new content editor for the website. So all that we've gone through, more is coming. So we have not seen this ourselves. We don't have any information beyond this bit that's in my report regarding the new content editor. So we'll have to take lessons on that as well. It'll affect the commission's website. Then also attached to my report are is the slideshow that we received from the Department of Equity, Racial Equity. And so if the commission wants to provide information to the department in May, I forget May 13th, I think, to include in our equity report, then we'll send that information to me, then we can include it, and then we'll submit it. Other than that, I can take any questions on my report.
Thank you, Director Ernst. Open it up to commissioners. Vice President Parker.
Thank you always for your report, and congratulations on the election. I know we'll be officially certifying next time, but congratulations on that. I have a few things, so maybe I'll just do a few and see if other people have other things to mention. And I think knowing what is in some of the commission reports, we'll probably talk about some of what I was going to say, so I'll probably not spend too much time on that. But I did really like the improvements to the reporting site. I really liked the bar that visually was showing how many ballots were left to count and the different types. And of a question, again, I'll leave for the commissioner reports later. I liked the jump to the different sections and things like that were great. And I generally found the landing page to be really easy to navigate. And I also, let's see, I'll go through a couple more of these. This was not in your report, but I also wanted to just mention a note in case other commissioners hadn't seen this. On Twitter, I really liked the Mythbuster Monday content that you all did on Twitter to try to, increase public understanding of things like the voting machines and the systems and software, provisional ballot counting and things like that. So just wanted to acknowledge that. But I also noticed there was like little to no engagement with those posts. And so I wondered if you all have thought about partnerships with other city agencies to retweet those, or, just other ways to get that content there, because I think it's really great, for dispelling some myths, obviously, because that's the hashtag you all used for that, or perhaps even providing like a general content calendar to other agencies who might be willing to help share that information for public education. And then maybe I'll do one more comment and then pause and see if you have anything to say. I wondered on the section related to, you'll be shocked that I'm mentioning the high school ambassador section. I wonder if there's any capacity to highlight the high school ambassador plans and success on social during the next high school voter education week. Through those ambassador programs, maybe not tagging them, because I know there might be, we don't maybe necessarily want to tag high school students in that way on social media, but some way to perhaps celebrate the civic engagement and leadership of young folks who are trying to increase election participation. So, and I'll pause. I have a couple other things I have to ask and bring up, but I'll let others have a chance or see if you have anything.
We've not thought about partnering with other agencies about the Mythbuster Monday content. We can consider that. And we can also consider providing more prominence to the ambassador program as well on social media. So,
thank you. I can pause on the rest. Do you want me to? I mean, I can keep going, but I don't want to monopolize time here. Okay, let's see. I also had noticed, well, actually I'll ask this question, and then I'll do the things that are not directly related to your report, but are tangential. With the outreach events, you've talked about these in the past. Are they mostly initiated, that were in your report, are they mostly initiated by partners or by the department? Because you've talked in the past about how you all go wherever you are invited to come. And I noticed in this that it looks like you generally spent more time in the districts that have general lower voter registration and turnout. And I wondered if that was intentional on your part or if that was orgs reaching out to you for those outreach events?
That was intentional on our part.
Okay, awesome. Okay, great. And then the couple, like tangential, I noticed that the Secretary of State has scheduled the next California student mock election for October 8th in 2024 to encourage students to become active voters once they're old enough. And it looked like that was something that's coordinated via schools as opposed to through the department. And so I wondered, now that you have some more communications with SFUSD, I wondered if there's a way the department can help make them aware of this opportunity to get young folks engaged more in the election and participating in that mock election. It looked like, you know, and sharing it at least by kind of the back to school time, the schools have to register by September 16th, so it's not that far before the actual mock election happens. But I just wanted to lift that idea if you all hadn't considered that before. And then the last question I had is I was recently asked why our ballot counting slows down so much after the first, you know, several days after the election happens. And I wondered if you could provide an explanation just so folks are aware. I have my theories on why that is, but it would be great to hear from you. And also if that information with all of the other kind of, you know, you have the great page on what the reporting schedule is like, but maybe so people don't move into conspiracy theory land, you know, on why it slows down so much. And that's it for me.
Do you mind if I jump in quickly? Because I think that, thank you, Vice President Parker. I think we should also talk about that in the context of results reporting.
Okay.
So we can talk about it now, but I think let's also make sure we bookmark it for that conversation as well, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Am I in pause on this?
Play.
Play. So
Sorry.
we do provide explanation in the press releases that we issue about the status of the counting. And as we go, once we get through the initial batches of vote by mail ballots, we have to do more manual review of the ballots. And so it's just a slower process. And then the second week is usually the provisional ballots, which all require manual review and processing. And then a lot of times when people vote provisionally, they go to the wrong polling place. So we have to remake those ballots. So we have to physically insert the intent of the voters into the program using the correct ballot types. And that's done manually. So just because we can't just run the ballots through a scanner and then upload and then report. So that's the reason for the slower pace after the initial 4 days.
Just quick follow-up question. Are we also, because you have such a ramp up in staffing also right around the election, does that have anything to do with it also as we get further away, or is it same number of staff? It's just literally just the manual work that's involved with counting those final ballots? Do we have fewer staff who are involved?
Depends on what time frame you have in mind. If it's the second week, then no, the staffing's not an issue.
Okay.
And then really even the first week is not an issue. It's just we don't report on Wednesdays because we stop processing ballots on Monday. And that allows us to send out lists of voters who voted to the polling places. Because in California, if someone shows up at a polling place without their vote by mail ballot, and we can communicate to the poll workers that the vote has not been cast, those voters can vote a regular ballot, not a provisional ballot. And so that's why we stop processing on Monday, but that means that there's no results to report on Wednesday. So we have to pick it back up again on Wednesday, and that's why there's a lag there. But once we pick up on Wednesday, you'll see that the totals increase pretty much through Saturday, and then it slows down again. Then we're doing the manual reviews.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I was also just going to add, as it pertains to the provisional ballots, I mean, based on what you put in your director's reports, the director's report, it's also pretty remarkable how many provisional ballots were not challenged or made it through and were counted. So that is a very long process that ultimately still yielded those ballots to be counted. I just wanted to call that out. Other folks? Yes, Commissioner Wong.
Thank you. I want to go back to Commissioner Parker's first comment on the Mythbuster Monday. I actually really enjoyed the content as well. It's really simple and concise. But I realize that it is currently only in English on Twitter, but I understand that because Twitter is primarily for English speakers. So I wonder, because I think those message is simple, but then it's very concise to dismantle some of the myth going around, elections, and it's gonna be a big issue moving forward. And this is something that I want to work with Director Arns with, is just to turn those materials into multiple languages and potentially collaborating with local CPOs that the department already have been working with. And when you guys go out and do those orientation, we can add those as part of the existing materials, because I feel like community members will be really benefit from learning and kind of asking questions. Because sometimes I realize for LE folks that don't speak English, they have a lot of questions, but they don't know how to ask those questions, right? So it's good to have those, this is the myth, this is the correct information, and they can then prompt them to ask questions when your staff are doing outreach. So I would love to work with you more on that and see if there's a possibility to incorporate some of the things that is already there into outreach materials for multiple languages. Just a comment, yeah.
Yeah, and most of the information is already in our materials and it is translated. It's on our website as well. It's just not, it's not posted as a tweet or a, whatever you call it now. And Facebook, but we do provide this information already in multiple languages. But certainly we can discuss this further. Mhm.
Okay. Commissioner Dye?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. And actually, I was thinking, you remember the quiz format that the commission did on our offsite retreat?
Jeopardy?
The Jeopardy, yes.
It's pride and joy.
Doing something like that, at the beginning of some of these community meetings with some of this material, and just kind of getting a show of hands as a way to kind of engage people. It's like, how many people think X or true or false? And it's a really great way to kind of get people into actually asking questions and contributing, and wow, I'm really surprised that's false, etc. So it's a thought about taking the same material you already have that's all translated and it's great for reference, but changing it into something that the audience can engage with. But great idea. Love the Jeopardy format. Yeah, I think it would really jazz up the outreach sessions. So I had a couple questions. I can't believe the city is changing to a new content management platform in 1 year. We just got used to the last one, although it had a lot of flaws. And one of the flaws was that the department had to continue to maintain a separate website because it was not compatible with what the Department of Technology chose to expose with Drupal. Any idea if by moving to this new content management platform, you'll be able to avoid having to maintain a separate?
Not for November, but also it's a content manager. It's not really a program for applications and tools. And so it's, right now I can say for November, no, we'll continue the current process as far as the tools are concerned and our content on SFGov.
Okay. Just thinking that maybe it might reduce the maintenance of having to maintain two separate sites, but we can always hope for that. And my second question is, wasn't in your director's report, but I was wondering, speaking back to our offsite, where we had a discussion about possibly extending the contract for Dominion and waiting on the RFP. I'm just wondering where you came out on that. Wasn't it about now that the RFP was going to have to be due?
Yeah, so there's no RFP issued for this. And there's no update that I can provide at this point on the contract.
Okay, so what was the timing then for if you had to put an RFP out, when was it supposed to go?
Yeah, there's no RFP. It'll be probably a sole source contract. And I just have to get to that point where we have a document. I haven't got there yet.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Dye. I had some thoughts, but I want to make sure, Commissioner Volsi, did you have anything Commissioner Bernholz thing. Well, feel free to jump in at some point if you do. So the statistic about well, thank you for putting this together. Also, congratulations on another successful election. Looking forward to reviewing it in April. There was one stat or statement that you included in the director's report that, well, there were a few things that jumped out at me, but this one in particular. According to the Secretary of State's last statewide report, San Francisco is currently leading in voter turnout among 15 counties with more than 350,000 voters. Would you say that's still true? Because I know you put the director's report before is that still?
I think so, yeah.
Actual?
Yeah.
It's amazing that, we're going to be talking a little bit more about like the media narrative that came out of this election. And I think that's something that perhaps gets lost, that actually San Francisco, well, California voter turnout may have been lower generally. San Francisco actually had the highest turnout among these large counties. So it's pretty awesome. And I definitely think speaks to the department. And I think we should continue to get that message out there in some way as commissioners and just as a city. I will want to ask more about this in the April meeting where we just do the review of the election, specifically about the 3,200 vote by mail ballots, not the provisional ones, but just the vote by mail ballots that were challenged and the amount that were cured, specifically how that compares. I can't recall how many, obviously more folks in San Francisco are voting by mail than they did in the last, actually, probably not obvious because that was 2020. I take that back. I would like to just understand how that would compares proportionally percentage-wise to previous presidential years, if that's a lot or little. And then I also wanted to ask a little bit more about ballot curing, and if you think that the cure rate is, because it says 288 voters have cured the challenged ballots. Do you think that voters are not curing theirs? Do you think that the window is very short to cure, which I imagine is a law? Or what do you think the reason is for folks not curing their ballots? Best guess. Also, if you'd rather wait till next month, that's totally fine. The themes for the challenged ballots, I'm curious to understand some of the which ones come up most often. There are different examples. I think you gave 5 examples or 5 reasons why a ballot would get challenged. I assume that an envelope not being signed is the most frequent. But I would just be curious to know, without you having to go into extensive detail, just curious to understand how how San Francisco voters are voting and their behaviors and how we can support. I was going to ask about the wagtail transition as well, and if this has any dramatic practical implications, which may not be relevant at this point. And then 2 other things I just wanted to mention was 100 outreach events between February 1st and the 29th is actually a lot. And so I just really want to make sure that we're celebrating that as a commission, because that's amazing. That's a lot. And the voter registration is doing really well. So thank you. It's really amazing and impressive. The other comment was just about the racial equity report, which is more an item for the commission to take note of, and for me to kind of circle back with the director that we will agendize this at the next commission meeting in April. So you'll have time to review, and we can put some thoughts together that we can just discuss during that meeting and then finalize before we share with the department for their inclusion in May. That's it for me. I don't know if you want to address the ballot, the specific questions around ballots. At this meeting, we can wait until April if you'd prefer. And like I said, no intense level of specificity required. Just curious to understand some of the themes there.
So I don't know the reasons why people don't cure. And we contact them by USPS mail, everyone who has to cure a ballot. We email them if we have an email address. We call them if we have a phone number. They have until 2 days before the election is certified to cure the ballots.
Oh, they have within, okay.
And so so in this case, they had 3 weeks essentially to cure the ballots. Different elections will have different response rates. So for November, we'll have a higher response rate probably than we did for the primary election. And not signing the envelope is one reason, but also ballots arriving late is another reason why we would challenge. That's really the highest category, is that the ballots came after the time frame where we could accept them. And so we also do follow-up phone calls and emails with folks if we have their information before the deadline. So it's a voter-based decision. I think it's not something I could generalize really why they respond or don't. Why they respond is obvious, but why they don't, I don't have an answer. And then as far as the wagtail, I don't know the impact on the department. What was your other points?
I think you kind of spoke to that, all of them.
Okay.
And just to clarify, I wanted to make sure I understood that I was not at all suggesting that the department did anything wrong. I want to make that clear. I just more was curious about what voters are doing. I'm certain that you that the department follows up with them.
Mhm.
I mean, in your report, you had said call, text, voter portal, USPS. So
Right.
I should have said that up front. That was not my intent. And one thing I did want to ask as a point of clarification is about 2 days before the election was certified. I misunderstood that. So what is the 24-hour window that was included in the director's report? Oh, it says with curable, the department has contacted voters. I see. So the department contacts voters within 24 hours of review of challenging the ballot. I see. So it's not actually the voter has 24 hours. It's the
Right.
department has 24 hours. Okay, thank you. That makes sense.
I think we actually have 3 days, but our policy is 1 day.
That's amazing. Wow. Great. Cool. Thank you.
Mhm.
Commissioner Dye.
Yeah, just a quick follow-up. So you mentioned, reason number 5, that the envelope was postmarked or returned late. Have you seen an increase in ballots just trickling in late because of the delays in the postal service?
No, the Postal Service in San Francisco, we collaborate with them before every election, and through the process, I have daily communications with the post office. And the post office's processes are not an obstacle to ballots getting back to us. And so, I think even in relation or in comparison to other counties, I think our post office does a really, really good job. And ballots will be coming into us for a year. I mean, they'll trickle in for a long time for whatever reason. But the majority of the ballots that can come to us within a week that are postmarked on election day usually come the first 2 or 3 days after election day. And then we'll get several thousand the day after, several thousand potentially on the second day after election day. Then it really starts to slow down, and then we'll get maybe a few hundred a day, maybe different for the presidential, but the point is that the post office is really capturing these ballots that are mailed in San Francisco and getting those ballots to us so that we can count them. And then we also monitor the postmarks on the ballots through the election cycle. And so we report back on a daily basis that the number of ballots through the early voting period, and then election day and post-election day, the number of ballots that are not postmarked. So the post office is getting daily feedback from us on whether its processes are stamping those ballots or not. So by the time, whatever issues the post office has, by the time we get to election day, all of the ballots are postmarked. There might be 1 or 2 and then that aren't postmarked by the machines. And then those are hand stamped by the postal representatives. So us getting ballots from the post office, there are no delays. They're postmarked, and 99% of them are getting processed and counted.
So, so if it's not postmarked, it's just, it didn't get fed through the machine properly or something like that? Are we required to make sure that the vote by mail ballots have a postmark? Even if we get it, even if the department receives it within the time period?
Right. So we need to look for the postmarks after Election Day,
Mhm.
but not prior to Election Day.
Okay.
And then if the ballots aren't postmarked on or before Election Day, following Election Day, then we can take the signature date on the envelope that the voter places on the envelope. And so if it's not postmarked, it's not a potentially fatal error on the or a fatal situation for that ballot. If the voter has signed the ballot and dated it on or before Election Day, we can still count that ballot.
And then you said that you can receive them up to a year after?
No, it'll trickle in, yeah.
And would those be envelopes that got lost in the mail, or they
Yeah.
just got sent in really, really late, or what?
I couldn't tell you. It's just all, again, I don't have specific knowledge on these ballots that come back. But yeah, I mean, it's not like they're in the hundreds. There'll be a stray ballot here and there that'll come in.
Wow. Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else? No? Okay. Let's move to public comment.
Oops.
There are no public commenters.
Okay, great. Thank you. That closes agenda item number 4. We'll now move to agenda item number 5, Commissioners' Reports. Discussion and possible action on Commissioners' Reports for topics not covered by another item on this agenda. Meetings with public officials, oversight observation activities, long-range planning for commission activities and areas of study, proposed legislation which affects elections and others. Before we dive into the bigger discussion, there are a couple other areas that we should discuss or speak to. I have a couple of updates, and then I also wanted to ask folks if they wanted to speak to or have a discussion about the public commenter who came for general public comment. So would folks prefer we start with the quicker updates and then dive into the discussion? Okay. There were a couple things longer things, one specifically to the director, but also to everyone. I will share this with you, but last month, the Department of Education, like the federal government, is announced that they will permit federal work study funds to be used for departments of elections to hire college students to work in elections offices. So basically what this means is the federal government would be paying for college students to be able to work in elections offices. That would include anything from getting out the vote activities, voter assistance at polling places through voter hotline, serving as a poll worker, supporting voter registration. And it allows all departments to recruit college students to do this, but also doesn't have to front the bill to pay for those folks. The federal government would pay for it. So I just wanted to make sure that the department was aware of this, if it's of interest, as a cost saving as well. Obviously, not an enormous cost saving, but it made me think about some of the work that I know Vice President Parker has been talking about with high school students. I think a good way to engage young folks at the college level as well. So I just wanted to make everyone aware, and I'll share around the announcement and toolkit for folks' reference, the toolkit from the Department of Ed for everyone's interest. I also wanted to chat or just remind everyone about the Form 700 and Sunshine training, not for new commissioners, but just for current, not new commissioners, longstanding commissioners, please make sure you get those in by April 2nd. It's the Form 700 and the Sunshine Training Declaration.
Training is due earlier.
I think it's due, really? I add April
Same
2nd.
time, I think.
Sure.
Yeah. You got the weekend.
Well, you're ahead of the game. Well, we will confirm, but I will take a look when we have a second and make sure it's April 2nd. I also want us to talk about the June meeting. It is on a national holiday, so I think we might want to move it to the following week, but we should talk through that. And then one other item that I think is worth talking about is around absences and providing notice for meetings. Obviously, we had to move this meeting, and so knowing that we are a commissioner down, or we do have one vacancy, our need to get to quorum is a little bit quicker. I mean, our potential to not have quorum rather is a little quicker. So I'd like to just kind of talk through that and remind folks, and also share that, you know, we do provide the city with notice of our meetings, and in our bylaws, we require that everyone attend every meeting if they can, that they should plan as far ahead. And one thing that I don't know if folks are aware of, but wanted to make sure they are, is that Secretary Davis provides attendance updates to the city as a part of our bylaws, and responsible for providing also our appointing authorities with attendance reports each year. It doesn't speak to what is inexcused versus excused. Everything for the most part has just been considered excused. But I do think when, like, we should all be striving to come to every single meeting, but I want to talk as a body about what notice should or should, like, what's fair for notice outside of the bounds of illness, you know, emergencies. Those things are not what I'm speaking about, but I think we should talk about it because it is something we commit to the city, to the public, to the director, to the DCA, to the secretary, and I think it's just fair for us to make it come to an agreement about that. So those are just some small updates, and before we dive into the other piece, my proposal for absences is that we inform that folks who are not able to join would try to get in notice within the month. So a month before the meeting, let us know. Let Secretary Davis and myself know. But I think after 1 week out, if it's something unrelated to illness or emergency, that might be, to me, grounds for an unexcused absence. I'm completely flexible though, and would like to collaborate with folks now that we've talked through what the bylaws say and also kind of the other considerations. So just to recap, talked about the Department of Ed, talked about the June meeting, the Form 700 Sunshine Training, and the policy around absences. And I will open it up for discussion about those, or if other people have updates other than the other item that we plan to discuss. Yes, Commissioner Dye.
Yeah, I think it's for our regular meetings, I think it's completely reasonable for everyone knows the schedule for a year in advance. So there's really kind of no excuse. If you have a conflict, you should be able to tell the rest of the commission by the meeting before if you're not going to make it. So I don't think that's unreasonable at all. If it's a special meeting and it's not on our regular schedule, I think there should be a little more latitude. But yeah, I mean, I think all of us are aware that we're inconveniencing, you know, 5 or 6 other commissioners and staff and people who might have wanted this room, having had to book City Hall rooms before. If we're going to have to cancel, it's best not to do it the last minute. And just to let everyone know, I've already informed President and Vice President Stone and Vice President Parker, be able to make a meeting in the latter half of June. So
Apologies, I forgot you said the latter half of June. I thought I was just thinking about that date. I wasn't thinking about that week. Thank you, Commissioner Dye. One piece that I wanted to just clarify is you don't have to share it in the public forum that you won't be there. Really, you're only just, the ask is, or at least the bylaw state, just let the secretary and me know so that we can make sure we're managing attendance. So, sometimes we don't want to always tell the world where we're going to be all the time. And that's quite all right, from my point of view. But if folks disagree, obviously open to hearing that. And yes, this was specific to regular meetings, not special meetings, of course. Vice President Parker.
Yeah, I just want to agree. I think that's great to give notice and that a month seems also reasonable. I think once in a while there is something that comes up, with your work that you may not have known a month out, but a week, is certainly at work. Like these things can be managed. Even if you have a heavy work week, you work around it because that's what we do and that's what we've committed to. But I think that the ideal of being at least a month out is very reasonable.
Commissioner Wong.
Yeah, I agree. I think a month of notice sounds reasonable. Of course, there should be some flexibility surrounding emergency and sick leave. And I personally have to go home every year at the end of the year. And, this is something that we can work it through. And I will give you, of course, like months in advance of like, this is, family trip I have to do. But is more or less regular when I will go back home. And then I think that this is something that we can work it through. But I think a week out would be a little difficult for everyone to rearrange our schedule. So I think a month in advance, but also depending on everyone's conditions and the reasons, and we can be understandable and flexible about that too. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, definitely don't want to be rigid, but anyone else? Commissioner Wolsey, Commissioner Bernals. Okay. Anyone else? All right. Seems like we have general consensus. As it pertains to the June meeting, we could punt this conversation to the agenda item on future meetings, so that we can get to the next topic and then also let the director go. Unless folks want to have strong feelings about that now. June. Okay, let's get into it. So, two memos on the topic. I'm going to just introduce my piece, and then I know Commissioner Dye has raised some specific areas of feedback on that's a little separate. So I'll just introduce mine, which is I've raised the issue about kind of the media putting a little bit the cart before the horse sometimes, or jumping to make determinations about races pretty much a little prematurely. We've been talking about this since 2022, specifically around the recall elections and the midterms. And as a commission, we've asked the department and the director to update the website and results reporting page to provide greater clarity and transparency, to which the department has accommodated. I think, to echo what Vice President Parker said a little bit earlier, that the website and the results reporting page looks much clearer and stronger. And I know Commissioner Dye is going to share more specific feedback she has about the website. I wanted to just specifically address the challenge around public information in the media, because I think similarly to the conversation about myth busting, is that we want people to trust the process and the results. And as I kind of outlined in the memo, there are some gaps that I think there could be a little bit of education done. Specifically, we know that vote by mail is increasingly how people are voting, upwards of 90%. What they don't know when they are voting by mail is that there are more steps for the department with vote by mail ballots. So that processing takes longer, as the director kind of talked through earlier, almost as if some of the steps that the voter was, having to take by going to a specific location to cast a ballot previously, some of those steps, though not exactly, are passed on to the department. And so it takes longer to count. And I think as the city and as the state have moved toward a lot more use of vote by mail, it's also important that we move the media to understand this as well. And I think it will alleviate some of the pressure on the department as well if we can help reframe some of folks' expectations. So one thing that was really effective in 2020, if you all remember, the national media did a pretty effective job, and I know through the work of a lot of pro-democracy organizations as well, election night was no longer a night. It was very much positioned as election week. And I think that we can do, if we start talking about this now, some prep work on this ahead of November. We talked in the last meeting about how our ballots are going to be even longer in November than they were for the primary election. And so if that's the case, again, the process of managing all those vote by mail ballots will continue to be extended. And so it's really on us to make sure that the media is at least aware. I think the department's done a really great job updating the website. Their process is very, very clear. But unfortunately, as I showed in some of the screenshots, people in the media did not necessarily pick up on some of these things. For example, some outlets were going so far as to calling actual races on election night when less than half of the total ballots cast had been counted. There was confusion from voters that I saw on Twitter, or whatever we're calling it now, X, but also from candidates who reached out and said, I don't really understand. Can you explain this to me? And I think, we saw this as well, just from the element of all these hot takes of what our city has become in like less than, well before the department had called any of the races, and certainly well before the election was certified. So I did ask the director, I gave the director a heads up that this is something that I thought would be important for us to talk about. And if he could share a little bit of insight into how the media is prepared, how the department engages with the media on this issue. But I think also the commission, I'd love to see us do some brainstorming about how we can work with folks, the media, and perhaps our appointing authorities, other avenues to ensure they really understand the ballot counting process and are accurately communicating that process to voters and the general public. One other example is that I think it was not picked up on, which I should have mentioned earlier, is, the department doesn't release election results, doesn't release more results the day after the election. But as you saw in some of the screenshots, that's not how the media was talking about it. They didn't understand this. So, a couple ideas I was having, just putting thoughts together, would love to have more discussion about this, is could we have some roundtables and invite local press to participate this summer? Can we invite candidates and electeds to participate in that? Are there ways in which we as a commission can support this ask while not putting more labor on the department, who already are like doing quite a bit to prepare for November? So that is my concern about results reporting. Over to Commissioner Dye to talk through her feedback as well. Director Ernst, do you want to provide a little bit of insight on the relationship between the department and the press? Obviously, you provide press releases ahead of the election, and extremely thorough press releases, and very clear the press releases multiple times throughout the counting process. But could you just share a little bit about what that looks like ahead of the election in general?
Well, beyond the press releases.
Yes.
So during this cycle, I speak to probably most of the media in San Francisco. and either email, phone, or they stop by and speak to them at the office. And so I don't speak to everyone, of course, but I speak to the media personnel who you would be accustomed to reading and seeing, and probably looking at their social media accounts. And so, and if there's questions about the results or the election, they're contacting me directly. They're not contacting the department generally. They're contacting me. And so I having those conversations. If someone is new to San Francisco, potentially they don't understand the process, or they didn't contact me, or they didn't speak to someone else in their organization. But for the most part, the media contacts me directly, and I speak to them every cycle. And I will, even more so going into November, have more conversations with media personnel. So any sort of messaging that needs to get out about results, we can certainly do that as we go through the process.
Thank you for talking through that. And I think one point of clarification that I have on my mind is more proactive in terms of just making sure they understand that the landscape has shifted from previous presidential elections in terms of how people vote and the impact that has on the department and the process, to make sure that the longer it takes to count doesn't mean that the results are any less accurate, which is a problem I know facing elections offices all over the country. So this wouldn't be so much as like in the days leading up to or in the midst of the election. It would be really just an educational process for the media, which might be completely unusual, but it was just an idea that I'd love to hear. If you have a perspective on that, I welcome that, Director Arns, otherwise also commissioners as well.
Yeah, we've already included that into our outreach presentations. So we've already started messaging around the fact that the processing of ballots will require more time in November than it did for March in comparison. And we'll build that out. We've already been thinking about building that out more, not just in outreach presentations, but also within City Hall. To the media, and we've done this before. This is not the first time, but we've made these efforts to explain the process and the time involved in processing ballots going into an election cycle. And so
That means they're doing, like, do you mind just explaining what that is without me jumping to
our
it?
standard outreach presentations. So what
are they? Like, what are standard outreach? Like, is the department proactively sending these to news outlets, or is this folks who are the inbound requests from media? What is the forum with which outreach presentations are being delivered?
This is to the public. So if we go to an organization, if we do a tabling, if we do a presentation.
Got it.
Yeah.
So at the events, at outreach events.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
We just finished March, so we haven't really started the campaigning for November yet. So, but we'll pick that up here rather quickly. Yeah. And we'll be issuing information to the media and City Hall. And not just once, but continually as we come into the cycle, as we go through the cycle. So.
Well, that's awesome that you're already including this as a part of the presentation and outreach events, which should have been obvious to me, but that is so, because it means when you're interacting with voters, you're actively and directly explaining it to them.
Right.
I think it's great that you're also going to incorporate the timeline for ballot processing, like how that's continuing to reinforce the length of time that takes. And yeah, if there's anything we can do to help with our appointing authorities or others to get that message even broader and wider, so that, I mean, I'm sure this is not the first election. I know this is not the first election where the media might
how would useful or not, because you're basically repeating all that information to everyone anyway.
We have, we can think about doing this again, certainly.
I'm hearing that I'm reading that the sound is a little wonky. I'm wondering if it's because we don't have those things on the microphones. Do you know where those might be?
Oh, the wind things. A baffle or something.
We're going to just take a quick second to, I think it could be the Wi-Fi. Commissioner Bernals is having trouble hearing and seeing us. And I was having trouble with the Wi-Fi. Not much we can do about that.
Mm-mm. Yeah, they normally do. Do you know what happened to them?
Hold on, just bear with me.
Yeah.
So apparently the video is bad too. Yeah,
It's a city hall system issue then, probably.
okay.
Like we can call.
Okay, it's well, because of the public, we also need to make sure it's our Wi-Fi that's causing the issue, not hers.
Right, but I was wondering if at least like she could call in and hear.
Yeah. I know. Commissioner Bernholz, can you hear us now? Will you just wave if you can? Okay. Okay. Looks like we're okay for right now. Apologies for that brief interruption. Vice President Parker, did you have other comments that you wanted to make? Okay. I feel like I cut you off. Okay. Anyone else have comments or thoughts or ideas that they want to propose about this topic? Commissioner Dye, I'll pass it to you to walk through yours, and then we can also, leave the floor open after.
Thank you, President Stone. Like Vice President Parker, I love the improvements made to the elections results reporting page. Just had a couple of additional suggestions as I was checking it every day myself. Hopefully you've had time to look at my memo now. I'd love to hear your reactions to some of these suggestions. And I did look at some other counties, and I provided in the memo an example from LA County, which also has these bars. And part of it is just to acknowledge that people absorb information in different ways, and visual, there are a lot of people who can see things. A picture's worth 1,000 words, right? And it's a lot easier to see a proportion visually. And so many of my comments here are just about improving the context so that people can kind of at a glance really see what's going on. I was happy to see that, unlike in the past, people did not misreport on the voter turnout. But it still took a couple of different places you had to kind of look to figure out what the turnout was. So I really liked how LA did it, that you can just see turnout right away. That's like really easy to figure out. I didn't think their ballot party distribution was a very useful chart. That was like very hard to read and understand, but the basic bar charts, I think it's really helpful. We have people who are colorblind that may not be able to distinguish color. So having an additional, physical visual thing to see, I think is also helpful that LA does, which is nice. In my example here, I just use the same donut charts that the department uses in its report because then you can see all of it in context and actually provide the same information the department already provides, but in the context of turnout. And as I'm suggesting, given our commission priority about voter registration, also pointing out how many people, didn't register, right? So we can look at it from the entire electorate. So, yeah, I'd love to hear your reactions, thoughts, the feasibility. These are just some suggestions. I'm sure if you share it with your staff, they might have even better ideas. But these are just a cut.
Yeah, I haven't studied this yet, so I don't have any specific responses. We haven't really, we're just now starting our conversations around November, so we haven't picked up really what changes potentially we would be making for the website for November. But certainly we appreciate the input and we can review it. I mean, many of the suggestions from the previous round, we incorporated those in our website, and we increased that input when we did the redesign when we went to the new Drupal SF site. So we certainly will use this input in our conversations. I don't know what we'll incorporate at this point, and I really don't have specific responses to the information you provided. So I can do so in April. So.
Great. And I'd love if any fellow commissioners have thoughts or different ideas. A forum for everyone to share.
Vice President Parker.
Well, first, just to both of you, I really appreciate you taking the time to put all of these together. And, you, President Stone, with all of the screenshots, from the different things that you're observing. I observed some of the similar things. And then also all of the gathering that you did, Commissioner Dye, of other things. I completely agree with the comments on visual aids. It's such a, I think many people process information that way. A little more quickly, and jump to fewer conclusions. If we have, of course, done the charts, right? Because then they might jump to the wrong conclusions if we don't do it that way. And I particularly like the idea of the voter turnout bar. And so, and I already commented, I really liked the bar that we had already on the site. And so I think adding like a voter turnout bar would be really useful. And I was glad to see the example from LA and agree with your other comments about that. The other thing that I agreed with from your report there was the idea of historical turnout for similar elections as opposed to every election, because it is really different. And so, again, that like aiding the media and the public in drawing reasonable conclusions, right? Because if you're comparing a midterm primary against a presidential, it's just, it's just, so helping people along, I think, in interpreting with reasonable conclusions is useful. So I like that suggestion as well. There was one note on the turnout circle graph that you had where I had to do a bit of a double check because my brain was taking a minute with some of the language. And I know this was just sample. This is not like it must be this way, but the saying perhaps instead of unregistered citizens is like eligible but unregistered, because there was something about it that I just I had to read it a few times to think, oh, okay, I know what you mean. And so, but I also think that people want to know actual or perhaps projected voter turnout once the ballot numbers, the number of ballots are in. I also think that they'd like to see the percent of that's counted like a thermometer, so we have a projected total, that's the top of the thermometer, then how many have we actually counted as we get along that bar. The other thing I actually really appreciated from this was all of the visual accessibility notes. I hadn't personally thought about those things. I have in other ways when we've talked about our website in general, but the comments on the visual contrast or the dark bars or the bolded, I really appreciated those. So generally, I appreciate, the suggestions that both of you are bringing here.
Commissioner LaBolsi.
I don't want to repeat what Commissioner Parker said. You said a lot of things that I was thinking about. I really appreciate both of you doing this. This is really great to look at. And I would just like to second that the voter turnout bar is really an excellent idea, and the different colors, and it's just easy to see. I would like to make one comment about unregistered citizens. I think to me, I would agree unregistered eligible voters or unregistered voters, but given the fact that in our jurisdiction, non-citizens in certain circumstances can vote, having the citizen there to me contradicts those terms. But thank you very much. This is extremely helpful.
Thank you, Commissioner Volsi. I had a couple of comments. Um, so point uh, um, for discussion misreporting on turnout figures, and in fact there was, and that isn't to knock on you, but to knock on those who misreported that. And so I do think there that did I just wanted to add that was also extremely helpful of how much, especially if we're going to focus on education about vote by mail, people understanding how much vote by mail is left. I think just people understanding how people voted and how many are outstanding. I do think actually what the department did is average turnout for the past 3 years instead of many ballots. I'm not sure. Bless you. Bless you. No. I actually thought that was Commissioner Wong, and you guys were just, having a duet of sneezes. So you were sneezing and then no. Anyways, oh yes, the average turnout for the past 3 years instead of many ballots, because I do think that if we start putting those numbers in proactively in the reports page, it might, how did I write this? My notes about this, that it could have the unintended consequence of giving the public a sense of something in the past that doesn't necessarily inform the present. And that's the only piece that I thought could potentially be misleading. Not necessarily intentionally, but that people might run with another predetermined idea or assumption. And my last comment was just the notion that there was a lot of feedback in here, and that there could be room perhaps for the department to not necessarily do everything, but I think there are some really great suggestions, so thank you. But knowing we have a lot of time, I just wanted to call that out. Sounds like my mic is bad. Well, hopefully we captured it on the recording. Vice President Parker.
Thank you. Just to resurface the thing I brought up earlier in Director Arndt's report around maybe there is some room within the reporting to talk about why it takes so long when you get past those first few days, and maybe that's in the press releases, once we get past the first few days, is that you might notice that it takes longer. Here's why, just a couple of sentences, or something, just wanted to slot it back in here since this is the topic now, so it didn't get lost even in my notes, with this part.
Thank you, Vice President Parker. Commissioner Dye?
Yeah, a couple of thoughts. So the reason I indicated average turnout for the past three, whatever type of election it is that I thought going back further might, there might be different, it might be too far in the past that it might not be relevant. Like, for example, Director Arntz included in his report that the average turnout since 1972 was about 50% in this type of election. Maybe that's held pretty steady. I don't know. That's something I'd love the department to assess. Like, what is the reasonable number to go back, that the trends have been pretty stable? Because, I think we're painfully aware that that the pandemic really affected things. And so maybe there's a blip there that, should be averaged out. So that was why I kind of suggested 3 years, but I would leave that to the discretion of the department. Just like Director Arntz has provided that information to us, I think that it's really helpful for the public to absorb what is normal, right? I mean, that's essentially, we're trying to put it in context for them. And so even though, for example, President Stone mentioned that we were among the highest among all large counties for turnout this time, for us, apparently it's a little bit slightly below what is normal because normal was 50%, right? So we're just a little shy of what's normal, even though compared to others, our turnout may be higher in general. So I think that context is very helpful because we really want to compare us to ourselves, I think. And then the other thought was back to Vice President Parker's comment about understanding, how many ballots have been counted and what the pace is. So one suggestion I had was to include a stat that said N% of ballots were counted by election night. And I calculated that was 43% of ballots had been counted by election night. And I don't know if that's pretty stable over time, that it's about 43% or it's about half, whatever the number is. But I think that's really helpful for people to know, wow, there are a lot of outstanding ballots, right? And you could actually do a little graph that shows, N% over, say, for the 7 days, right? What the percentage typically looks like before you hit 100%. And that, I think, would be a great way for people to compare, like track progress against what the normal count is.
So I just wanted to jump in on that. A couple things. I will say, though, I would, I don't know that I would agree with the idea of comparing the counting process to previous years, specifically because it has changed so much, right? Like in the 2020 is really the first election where everyone was receiving a ballot in the mail. And so I think it's kind of the exact thing that I'm getting at here, that like things have actually changed because more and more folks are voting by mail. I'm going to talk into this a little louder just to make sure the sound is picking up. Sorry. More and more people are voting by mail. And that's kind of the point, is that if we start comparing ourselves in terms of the speed of counting, I think actually that could open up more questions of if the process is problematic. So I would push back a little bit on that one. And then the comparing us to ourselves is interesting. My first instinct is to say that's yeah, I would agree. But I also, it's so challenging with this media narrative because there was so much focus on the low turnout, but relatively speaking, actually, it wasn't low turnout. It may have been low turnout in terms of, previous cycles, but compared with the rest of this, compared with voter behavior in other counties with the rest of the electorate of California. So So I guess it's all a matter of perspective, but I'm coming from the lens of what is the public understanding, and what is the media circulating to the public about the process and voter turnout. So those are just 2 points of clarification, 2 points of response. And then I wanted to just clarify about the past 3 years, that I was referring very specifically to the page that has turnout among all eligible citizens, that the second paragraph underneath it, another helpful fact to include is instead of just saying many ballots would still need to be counted might be an average of conducting the past 3 years. So I wasn't necessarily responding to the point about 3 years, but more just saying, I don't think we should mention previous, like I don't think we should even mention past years. I think we should stick with many ballots. So just that was a point of clarification. It wasn't about the previous paragraph. Oh, I thought someone had their hand up. Did you have anything else?
I was going to say that the first thing that you said, President Stone, was I also wanted to just uplift is that how we are voting has changed so significantly that there is, and it's actually something that I even, observed as I was reading the media coverage of this election, is that there were a lot of members of the media who were trying to draw conclusions that are impossible to draw. Because the way that we vote has shifted so dramatically. And even what happened in, 2020 or 2022, it has still shifted. I'll give myself as an example. I've always been a day of voter. I like going to the polling place. I really like it. It feels like a civic act. It is, I like getting my sticker there. And when I did in 2020, I had to vote by mail, and then I did it one more time in 2022, and I was done with that. Like it made it feel just not the event that I want it to feel like. And so I'm back to in person, and I'm not going to do vote by mail unless I happen to be out of town on election day. And so I think that we can't, I want the media to not draw unreasonable conclusions on trends. And I also, anyway, so I just wanted to just agree with what you were saying there.
Thank you. Does anyone have any thoughts about, and we can continue to talk about this, but thoughts about what we could do to support the department in engaging with communities, engaging with the media to make sure they understand the process? Is one thing that I think is so remarkable about the results reporting page that the department provides is the reporting schedule page is extremely clear. I mean, it is extremely clear. I mean, even the line about the canvas period reporting, that, when people can expect the next update, what the process looks like. So how can we bring more media to understand that perhaps the message is things have changed. Let's make sure that the story, that things reflect this. It's just because we're not, at the height of a pandemic in 2020 doesn't mean that same concept of election week has gone away. We should continue to, it was a good practice, and we should continue to push for that. So if folks have ideas, I would welcome that. And like I said, it doesn't have to be today. We can keep talking about it. I think I had brought up our appointing authorities, but I think that might be a good option as well. Yes, Commissioner Volsi.
Would it be appropriate for the commission and members of this commission to be a part of any educating the public about the disinformation that comes out, and letting them know what the process is? Would that help to take some of the burden off of the department, which is already doing this work, which is already informing the public, educating the public? Could we be an additional piece to that? in some form of really, as you were saying, President Stone, the voting habits have changed. I think on this commission, we vote, I mean, I've been voting by mail for, yeah, a long time. So is that something that could be helpful if we were to take part in that process of educating and informing the public of what the process is and why the outcomes are as they are and why there's still time before we have the official results? Would that be appropriate, or is that not something that's in our? It's just a question. I know we're going to be talking about this more, but that's the idea that came to mind for me.
Thanks, Commissioner Volsi. I mean, I think it's appropriate. I mean, I definitely think you've raised some good questions of whether the department would want us to do that. And I won't put Director Arntz on the spot asking him that right now in a public forum. But I mean, those are two questions that are raised. But I think we could all have that conversation of how we could jump in. I definitely. Thank you, Commissioner Dye.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's not just election week, it's election month,
Yeah, fair.
right?
Fair.
And I wonder if, yeah, but we have early voting, right? So, I don't remember if you did this, Director Arntz. Did you do any kind of a press conference at the beginning of election month?
No.
So that would be an idea, especially before November. It's a big election. We're going to have probably an 8-card ballot, right? So there are like a bunch of big things that I think are announcement worthy, and invite the press and let's indoctrinate them all then at the start of election month, right? Kick off key things. And then to accompany it, I think it would be great to put together an FAQ and put it on the website. So during election month, you can kind of highlight, it kind of goes in line with the Mythbusters theme, right? It's like kind of highlight a new question and, just like the question that Vice President Parker asked, why does it slow down? So things, and I'm sure that this commission would be happy to kind of brainstorm some questions. And plus, you guys are answering the phones all the time, right? So you know what kinds of questions you're getting from the public. So just distilling that down into a really clear FAQ so that members of the public can just look it up themselves. I think that would be great.
Thanks, Commissioner Dye. I have a thought on that, but I'll go to Commissioner Wong first and then I'll jump in.
Thank you, President Stowe. I think there are two pieces. One is media engagement and another one is public education. And for media engagement, I second the idea of hosting a press conference. This is something that we can discuss with Director Arntz moving forward. And one comment is, I noticed among Chinese immigrants communities, for example, they've heavily relied on Chinese ethnic media to look at all this result, which is similar to what President Stone's report showcased. Lots of disinformation, lots of jumping to conclusion, maybe even to a larger extent in Chinese ethnic media from my observation. So I think when we talk about media engagement, we have to be mindful of the language aspect also, and how to engage with ethnic media, meaning not English-speaking ones, because I can only speak for Chinese immigrants communities as a Chinese immigrant myself, that disinformation is even worse in a way among Chinese social media like WeChat. So I am still working on some solution. I don't have one. So not to I understand why things has been like this, because it's really hard, right? Looking at this media landscape right now. So this is something we should keep brainstorming and talk about. And with the public education piece that, you brought up, I think one suggestion, once again, just brainstorming is, as commissioners, we can also hold special hearing, engaging with, CBOs that do voter outreach directly. And I think these stuff that we just talked about, I'm not sure if local CBOs actually is aware of all those information, because it's number one, it's pretty complicated in terms of number. And from my understanding, CBOs do voter outreach and also depending on all these like numbers, but it's really hard for frontline workers to determine like which data to look at and how to then reach out to their own communities to present, right? So I think, to your point, I think doing public education in a way that like, hey, this is what we know, right, about this data and information about voter turnout that is actually not that bad, compared to what the media has been reporting. These things are not circulated, I think, among grassroots organizations. And then if we were to do something engaging with CBOs, I think hosting a special hearing, I don't know in what form, since I'm pretty new here, I'm just throwing out idea of engaging with them, maybe hear them out. Like, what is the difficulties of engaging with communities? What is the things that you're not sure about that maybe perhaps we can hopefully answer the questions or relay the message to the department, right? Because department has a lot going on already. It's really hard, right, to add another task. And I think if we can help Director Arns for a little bit of like collecting those feedback and relay those message to the department. So when they're doing outreach, themselves, they can improve on some of the contents or just simply FAQ, right? That would be really helpful in multiple languages too, to solve up some of the issues with media reporting. So yeah, that's just like my 2 cents.
Thank you, Commissioner Wong. So I'll just jump in on the comment I was going to make, and then I had one other comment I wanted to, or one other couple points I wanted to make in response to Commissioner Wong, which actually I think can kind of go hand in hand. So I think the FAQ would probably be a good idea. I will say I see the challenge is actually less about the clarity of information, but more about the fact that the media isn't using the information that's already there. Like, I think the department has a lot on its website. Not that I think that an FAQ would be bad, but I think what ends up happening is the department is doing so much to make it clear, but yet it's not getting taken up by the right people to be able to distribute that properly. Because when people go to look up election results, they're not actually, their first stop isn't always necessarily the department. The first stop might be the Chronicle or some of these other outlets, Chinese media outlets as well. So I think personally, I actually think it's less of a department issue than it is the media issue. And then the second piece, second thing I wanted to, and like I said, that's not to say that an FAQ wouldn't be helpful. That's just to say, I think there's so much there that they're already not using that could be better used. The other thing was about public education about public education, because I think actually, Commissioner Wong, to speak to some of what you mentioned, I actually think that's like a much bigger conversation that is relevant, but maybe a little bit bigger than this specific issue. That doesn't mean we couldn't talk about it as a body, but I think as it pertains to making sure the public trusts the results of the election and trusts the integrity of the process, I personally think that would be a different process. And I do know that the department actually does a fair amount with like the grants that they offer with nonprofits. I don't know if it's the specific organizations that are on your mind, but I do know there is some work, and also the Office of Civic Engagement does a lot. So I think that's something, the public education piece is something, and getting feedback is something we should definitely keep talking about, even if not necessarily pertaining to this issue. I do have some reservations about special hearings, because I think that can draw a lot of attention to us when ultimately I think we want to, I personally believe that we should stay in the background and be able and try to help in the way that we can by not centering or drawing too much public scrutiny or media attention to the Department of Elections. So I'm a less excited about the idea of that, but whether it's a press conference or a roundtable or I think that we're all seemingly on the same page that getting the media, and in addition to, only English language speaking media, but also the Chinese press in the city, to engage more proactively with the department to make sure it's empowered to understand why it's election month and not election week or night. I think we're all kind of on the same page. So I appreciate everyone's input. Commissioner Volsi.
Excuse me, I just had one last comment. I think I agree with you about staying in the background and that's why I mentioned, is it appropriate for us to be doing this? And from my perspective, this would be to inform the public as a countermeasure to the media and prior to the election. But I think at the same time, we should concern ourselves a little less about the media because we don't have control there. And so we understand what the narrative is going to be. We know that this is an upcoming election that might be contentious for many reasons. And so for me, the goal is not to circumvent what the media is doing, because they're going to do what they do, but to be proactive in educating the public about the fact that our department and our department head is doing everything to make sure, and has always done everything to make sure, that these elections are trustworthy. So that's more of where I was coming from. And if we can be a support to the department in informing the public that that is the case, and here are the examples of how that is the case, is more of what I was speaking for. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you, Commissioner Volsi. Vice President Parker.
Thank you. Yeah, I like the idea of us looking for opportunities like that. And I'm recalling something else that Director Arntz said a little earlier, which is that in the outreach presentations, they've already, I think, Director Arntz, you all also have already put a lot of this kind of information in those presentations. And so, right, some.
Yeah.
So some, so that's a good, it's just wanted to remind ourselves that he did say that there is at least some there, and, and perhaps there will be adjustments, as I'm sure there are every year, to what those presentations look like. So that's one place where any organization that the department is already doing outreach, that they are hearing that. But yeah, I mean, I support any way we can continue doing that.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay. Well, I appreciate the discussion